If he tries to shake us down, we kill him, period. We make it fun, but we kill him. End of story.
In his middle age, Earl Brooks is a well-known wealthy businessman who mingles among America's upper class. He has a happy family, a successful career, and is passionate about charitable causes, a textbook example of a successful man in the eyes of others. However, what no one knows is that hidden deep within Mr. Brooks's mind is an evil persona, a dark alter ego he calls Marshall. Marshall is obsessed with killing, particularly with the idea of the perfect crime. Under his influence, Brooks has committed multiple murders and has gradually come to view murder as a form of art. He often selects random strangers from busy streets as his prey, then stalks them, waiting for the right opportunity to sneak into their homes and shoot them. Before each crime, Brooks installs a silencer on his gun and wraps it in a sealed plastic bag to prevent leaving behind any shell casings or gunpowder residue. After killing, he even digs the bullets out from the victim's body, then meticulously cleans every corner of the crime scene to ensure that no incriminating evidence is left behind. Thanks to this cautious and meticulous style, although Brooks has killed many people, he has never made a mistake and remains at large to this day. Additionally, during each murder, not only does Brooks photograph the victim posed in his preferred positions as a twisted memento, but he also deliberately leaves a bloody thumbprint from the victim in a prominent spot at the crime scene. As a result, the police have named him the Thumbprint Killer. Although each act of killing brings Brooks an intense thrill and pleasure, afterward he is consumed by overwhelming guilt and unease. He constantly tries to suppress his murderous urges, but the evil persona Marshall continues to push him toward killing again and again. For years, Brooks has carried out one murder after another in this painful inner torment. Recently, he set his sights on a middle-aged couple. One night, under the cover of darkness, Brooks deftly picked the lock and slipped into the couple's house, shooting them cleanly and efficiently while they were in bed during intimacy. Just as he was preparing to clean up the scene afterward, Brooks suddenly noticed that the couple hadn't drawn their curtains. Their bedroom window faced an apartment building directly across the street. Fortunately, it was late at night and the residents in the opposite building were likely all asleep, so there probably weren't any witnesses. Calmly, Brooks closed the curtains and proceeded as usual, posing the corpses, taking photos, stamping the thumbprint, and thoroughly cleaning the scene. After completing all these rituals to his satisfaction, he quietly left. Early the next morning, after receiving a report, the police immediately launched an investigation. The case was assigned to a female officer named Tracy, who had been tracking the thumbprint killer for years and was well acquainted with Brooks's criminal style. The moment she arrived at the scene, she immediately recognized it as another of the thumbprint killer's crimes. Yet once again, Tracy failed to find any valuable evidence at the crime scene. However, she soon noticed the apartment building across from the scene of the crime. Hoping to find a possible witness, Tracy began going door to door to interview the residents. Meanwhile, at his office, Brooks was unexpectedly visited by an uninvited guest, a photographer calling himself Mr. Smith, who brought Brooks a set of photos, ones that clearly documented the entire murder Brooks committed the night before. It turns out Smith lived in the apartment building directly across from the crime scene. Not long ago, he had discovered that the middle-aged couple killed by Brooks often left their curtains open during their nighttime activities, which deeply satisfied Smith's twisted voyeuristic urges. Almost every night, he would station himself by his window, hoping to secretly photograph the couple's intimate moments. But unexpectedly last night, he ended up capturing Brooks committing murder on camera. Since Brooks was a well-known businessman frequently featured in newspapers and magazines, Smith quickly recognized him and easily tracked him down. But Smith didn't come to extort money from the wealthy Brooks. Instead, he used the photos to blackmail him into bringing him along for his next kill, because he also wanted to personally experience the thrill of murder. It seems this guy, just like Brooks, is a full-blown psychopath. Ironically, the night before, after finishing the murder, Brooks had planned to quit killing for good and put an end to this dark chapter of his life. But to his dismay, a witness suddenly appeared, and he had no choice but to agree to Smith's demand, promising to take him out the next night to hunt for a new target. After getting rid of Smith, Brooks was unexpectedly visited by his daughter Jane, who had suddenly come to see him at the office. Jane was currently attending university out of town, and since it was neither the weekend nor a holiday, Brooks was curious about why she had shown up out of nowhere. Jane explained that she wasn't learning anything useful at school, so she had already filed for withdrawal and wanted to help her father manage the family business. Brooks clearly didn't buy her story. Later, when the father and daughter returned home, Jane finally revealed the real reason under her mother's pressure. She had gotten pregnant unexpectedly, which forced her to drop out of school. As for the identity of the baby's father, Jane refused to say. Seeing that the situation was already set, Brooks and his wife didn't press her too much and certainly didn't blame her. Instead, they gently asked how she planned to handle the pregnancy. After a moment of hesitation, Jane said she wanted to keep the baby. Brooks and his wife supported her decision. After all, the family had plenty of money and raising a child wouldn't be difficult. That night, Marshall quietly whispered to Brooks, pointing out that Jane seemed evasive during the conversation, that her eyes were dodging, as if she was still hiding an unspeakable secret. But at that moment, Brooks didn't have the mental space to dwell on his daughter's behavior. His top priority was to deal with the troublemaker Smith. Smith showed up as promised, ready to go with Brooks in search of a new victim. As soon as they met, Smith handed Brooks a business card. The card's owner was none other than Detective Tracy, the female officer leading the investigation into the thumbprint killer. On his way to meet Brooks, Smith had run into Tracy, who was going door to door looking for eyewitnesses. Although Smith lied, claiming he had been asleep at home the night of the murder and saw nothing, Tracy still gave him her card and told him to call if he remembered anything. Smith now gave the card to Brooks as a warning, to be on guard against this policewoman. After pocketing the card, Brooks drove Smith to a neighborhood. To enhance Smith's sense of participation, Brooks let him choose the next victim himself. But not only did Smith suffer from voyeurism and murder urges, he also had severe decision paralysis. On the street, he was overwhelmed by the choices and couldn't settle on a target. Just then, a truck suddenly cut them off, forcing Brooks's car to the side. Smith immediately decided that the truck driver would be their next target. Brooks didn't object. He instructed Smith to first photograph the driver's face and license plate number, so they could later research the man's personal information online, and then find an opportunity to kill him. That night, once back home, Brooks first investigated the identity of the truck driver. Then, he hacked into the local police department's internal system to access Detective Tracy's personal file. What he found surprised him. Tracy had cracked several difficult criminal cases and personally brought many highly intelligent murderers to justice. Clearly, she was a formidable and dangerous opponent. But what truly shocked Brooks was learning that Tracy came from a wealthy family. Her father was a well-known local tycoon, and Tracy herself owned assets worth tens of millions. Women like her usually either live recklessly, spending their money on chaos and indulgence, or take on corporate roles, helping their fathers manage the family empire and branding themselves as strong women. So why would someone like Tracy reject the privileges of her background, choosing instead a tough, dangerous life as a homicide detective? Brooks couldn't help but feel a strange admiration for this woman. But the very next day, the Tracy he had just come to admire fell into trouble and danger. It turns out Tracy was in the middle of a messy divorce with her husband, Jesse. Jesse was a shameless parasite, living off Tracy's money while keeping other women on the side. After learning the truth about him, Tracy resolutely decided to divorce him. Jesse agreed but demanded $5 million in compensation for wasted youth. Tracy didn't want to pay this absurd sum, yet she desperately wanted to cut ties with him. With no other options, she visited a lawyer to seek advice. Unfortunately, the lawyer admitted that there wasn't much that could be done. He could try negotiating to reduce the amount, but couldn't promise results. On her way back to the station, Tracy was suddenly abducted by two people, a white-haired muscular man called Thornton the Hangman and his blonde girlfriend. They forced her into a van. The Hangman was an escaped drug dealer. 2 years ago, Tracy had personally arrested him. Now, seeking revenge after breaking out of prison, he came after her with his partner's help. Fortunately, Tracy fought back quickly and managed to escape after a struggle. That same night, Brooks and Smith were tailing the truck driver, preparing to kill him when they accidentally saw the drug dealer enter an apartment building. Brooks immediately recognized him from Tracy's file. According to that file, the Hangman should still be serving time in prison. So, how was he suddenly free? Brooks instantly realized that he must have escaped from prison. He also remembered from Tracy's file that she was divorcing her husband, Jesse. And just like that, Brooks came up with a brilliant new plan. He decided to abandon the plan to kill the truck driver and instead make Jesse, Tracy's husband, their next target. Though Smith was annoyed and confused by the sudden change of target, he dared not question Brooks. The next day was the weekend. While Brooks was resting at home, two police officers unexpectedly visited, not for him, but to question his daughter Jane. According to them, a murder had occurred at Jane's university. The victim was one of her male classmates. Before the crime, a witness had seen Jane arguing with the victim, and after the murder, she suddenly dropped out of school, which made her the prime suspect. Despite the interrogation, Jane remained calm and composed. She denied everything flawlessly, distancing herself from the case. But Brooks, with the instincts of a killer, was convinced his daughter was the murderer. He suspected that the victim might be the father of Jane's unborn child. Still, now was not the time to confront her or seek the truth. Brooks was also confident that his double life had been hidden perfectly. His wife and daughter knew nothing about his string of murders. That meant Jane's decision to kill couldn't have come from his influence. The only plausible explanation, in his mind, was that she had inherited his murderous genes. This realization filled Brooks with a creeping unease. Determined to protect his daughter, he immediately left home under the pretense of a business trip. That night, in disguise, he rushed to Jane's university and, using the same methods the police described in the original case, he randomly murdered another student who had been walking alone. Since this was the second similar murder on campus, local police quickly determined that a serial killer was at work. At the time of the second murder, Jane was at home with a clear alibi. Thus, the police temporarily cleared her of suspicion. Having helped his daughter out of trouble, Brooks picked another dark and windy night and took Smith to sneak into Jesse's home, the husband of Detective Tracy. Jesse wasn't home when they arrived, so the two found a concealed spot to hide. Before long, Jesse returned with a woman. From their conversation, it became clear that this woman was Jesse's divorce attorney and mistress. Tracy, in her desperation to get rid of Jesse, had agreed to pay him $2 million as a separation settlement. Jesse and his mistress were now celebrating the windfall with drinks. Disgusted by this pair of scumbags, Brooks urged Smith to hurry up and kill them. But the same Smith who had been loudly fantasizing about the thrill of killing now froze in fear, so much so that he wet himself. Seeing this, Brooks had no choice but to take matters into his own hands and personally executed Jesse and the woman. After the murders, he performed his usual ritual, staging the bodies, taking photos, leaving the thumbprint. But this time, he didn't clean the scene thoroughly. Instead, he deliberately left behind Smith's urine, which had soaked into the floor. His goal was clear: frame Smith as the thumbprint killer, diverting police suspicion away from himself. That way, Brooks could retire from killing without ever being caught. However, on the way back while Brooks was driving, Smith suddenly grabbed the gun from Brooks's waist and aimed it at him, intending to kill him. It turns out Smith was deeply humiliated by his cowardice during the killing and wanted to prove he wasn't weak. He also wanted to eliminate Brooks to erase any evidence of his own involvement. But Brooks stayed eerily calm as the gun pointed at him. He told Smith that he had been planning to die anyway, since only death could end his compulsive killings. He even explained that he had already selected a secluded burial site and had dug a grave there in advance. He requested that Smith kill him at the gravesite. If Smith refused, Brooks warned, he would slam the accelerator and crash the car head-on into the next vehicle they saw, which would kill them both. As the speed increased, Smith panicked and agreed to wait until they reached the grave. They soon arrived at a desolate wilderness where a deep pit had already been dug. Brooks calmly walked to the edge of the pit and urged Smith to pull the trigger. But when Smith tried to fire, the gun malfunctioned. No bullet came out. Before Smith could even figure out what went wrong, Brooks grabbed a nearby shovel and slashed his throat. It turns out the ever-cautious Brooks had anticipated this betrayal and had tampered with the gun beforehand. After killing Smith, he pushed the body into the pit and buried it. Then, using a fake identity, Brooks contacted a moving company and had all of Smith's belongings removed from his apartment during the night. The next morning, Detective Tracy was still interviewing residents in Smith's building, hoping to find eyewitnesses. One female resident provided an important clue. She often came home late from work and had noticed that the murdered couple across the street always left their curtains open at night while being intimate. She also revealed that Smith had secretly photographed them and had shared those indecent photos with other singles in the building. Upon hearing this, Tracy immediately suspected Smith and returned to his apartment to interrogate him further. But when she got there, she found the apartment completely empty. On the floor, she discovered a moving order, which included Smith's new address. Just as she was preparing to head to that address, a colleague rushed over to stop her. He told Tracy that her husband, Jesse, and his mistress had been found murdered in their home. From the crime scene, it appeared to be the work of the thumbprint killer. But there was a complication. Since Tracy and her husband had major disputes over the divorce terms, the police leadership began to suspect Tracy herself. They believed she might have used her knowledge of the thumbprint killer's methods to murder her husband and his mistress. Tracy's colleague had rushed over to inform her that she was being summoned back to the station for investigation. When Tracy learned that her own superiors suspected her, she was furious. Her temper as a wealthy heiress flared. Instead of explaining, she simply knocked her colleague to the ground and stormed off. She followed the address listed on the moving company's order, which Brooks had deliberately left behind, and arrived at Smith's new residence. Coincidentally, just as she was about to enter, Tracy ran into the hangman, the escaped drug dealer, and his girlfriend in the hallway. The hangman panicked upon seeing Tracy and drew his gun, leading to a shootout. In the chaos, Tracy, the better shooter, managed to hit both the man and his girlfriend. Realizing he had no way out and unwilling to return to prison, the hangman took his own life, but not before shooting his girlfriend first. Having narrowly survived, Tracy searched Smith's new apartment and then returned to the station to report everything to her superiors. A few days later, one afternoon, Brooks sat alone in a cafe, sipping coffee and reading a newspaper. On the front page was a major story. Police had found a huge collection of crime scene photos taken during the murders inside Smith's new apartment. Even more damning, they had recovered Smith's DNA from the puddle of urine found at the murder scene of Tracy's husband, Jesse. As a result, the police officially concluded that Smith was the long-elusive thumbprint killer, and Tracy was cleared of all suspicion and even received a special commendation. Reading this, Brooks smiled knowingly. Everything had gone exactly as he planned. He had always admired Tracy, and helping her get rid of her insufferable husband, Jesse, had been part of his personal agenda. And for the moving order Tracy found in Smith's apartment, that was left by Brooks on purpose. His plan had two goals. First, frame Smith by leaving overwhelming evidence of the murders. Second, lure Tracy to the neighborhood where the escaped drug dealer was hiding. If the drug dealer killed Tracy, Brooks would be rid of a dangerous opponent. If Tracy killed him, no harm done. Either way, Brooks came out on top. Though the plan had succeeded perfectly, Brooks still had one lingering question. Why didn't Tracy rely on her wealthy family's resources? Why didn't she live like a carefree rich girl or become a high-powered businesswoman? Why choose the exhausting, dangerous life of a detective? To satisfy his curiosity, Brooks stole a phone from another customer in the cafe and called Tracy, identifying himself as the thumbprint killer. Tracy, thinking the caller was Smith, tried to buy time for the police to track the call, so she answered truthfully. She explained that her father had always favored sons over daughters and was cold and distant toward her from childhood. Because of this, she had vowed to forge her own path, relying on no one but herself to prove her worth. Brooks, now understanding her, was content. He tossed the phone away and disappeared before the police could trace him. That night, as he was preparing to sleep, Brooks walked into his daughter Jane's room like usual, intending to say goodnight. She was already asleep, and he gently walked over and pinched her toes, as he often did. But the motion startled Jane awake. In a reflexive move, she pulled scissors from under her pillow and stabbed Brooks in the neck. Blood sprayed. As he collapsed, Jane calmly got out of bed, picked up Brooks's black-rimmed glasses from the floor, and put them on herself. In his final moments, Brooks saw Marshall, his evil persona, reflected in Jane. Horrified, he jerked awake. It had all been a nightmare, but still the fear lingered. Not that his daughter would one day kill him, but that she would become the next him. This story comes from the 2007 suspense thriller Mr. Brooks. Though the film is relatively obscure and not highly acclaimed, the creator of this content believes that the main character, Mr. Brooks, stands out as one of the most memorable villains in modern cinema. His elegance, ruthlessness, and calculated killing methods rival even Hannibal Lecter from The Silence of the Lambs.